Thanks everybody for joining. Today we're gonna have a great chat with Ellen, who's working as a designer for Ralph Lauren, a brand that I think all of you know very well to some degree. So really excited to be able to have this conversation. Also, for you all to be able to ask questions and kind of deep dive into a little bit more about her role and how she got into the role that she's in. If you're looking to get into fashion, if you're looking to get into design, if you're thinking about kind of how to work for, a huge brand like Ralph Lauren, this is a great chance for you to that advice. Um, so a little bit about Ellen and Ellen, I hope we got all this right. Concept designer and special projects at Ralph Lauren, with over 10 years of experience and some experience in styling, trend forecasting, and sustainable design. And your background spans design, editorial illustration, and creative consulting. So I'll let Ellen do her own full proper introduction in just a minute here. Who am I? I'm the COO of Artbound Initiative. So you probably heard of us if you've jumped into this meeting, but we're a global internship program for creatives, those who are looking to get into fashion, who are looking to get into like film or TV or content creation or design. And we've placed over 1,000 interns in the creative industries through our program. So, as part of that, we want to bring you this opportunity to speak also with people that are working within the roles that you might be aiming for and get a better understanding of those roles and also of those companies. Okay. A quick kind of rundown of the call today. So first, we're going to talk about Ellen's career journey. Second, we're going to talk about our initiative, how to get an internship in fashion. And then last, we're going to end with all of your questions. So as you're coming up with questions, as you're thinking of things throughout the call, please put them in the chat. We love having as many questions as possible. And then we'll get through hopefully all, if not most of your questions throughout the rest of the conversation today. So I'm just going to stop sharing. And Ellen, let's start off. I would just love if you wouldn't mind giving everybody an introduction of how you got, like what you studied, how you got into the role that you're in now, and a little bit of your journey would be great.
Great, thanks, Ben. Hi, everyone. I have a little bit of a less traditional background in how I got into fashion. I'm from Tennessee originally, and I went to University of Tennessee for an art degree. I studied printmaking and kind of like planned on going into illustration. And when I graduated, I couldn't stop thinking about wanting to be in the fashion industry. A lot of my subject matter in undergrad was fashion related. I had learned how to sew from my aunt. So I applied to Parsons and did their associate program. And I think it was an option of 1 to 2 years. So I did it in a year and a half. And my first real internship was actually at Ralph Lauren. I didn't expect this role to exist at all. So what I do there and what I interned in is concept design. That was the thing that no one had told us about in school. And it kind of was exactly the right fit for me. Um, Concept design is still fashion design, but it's kind of like when you create the mood for the whole season, and that's your entire job essentially. So I did that for Ralph Lauren Blue Label Women's for my internship, and then I moved into kids because one of my projects while I was there was kids related, and now I do concept design for kids, and it took a year-ish to actually get the full-time job. I interned and worked at a couple other places in between. But not every company offers concept design, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I found my way back, and I've been there on and off since 2013. And my internship was 2011.
Cool.
So yeah, that's kind of what I do. I know that sounds very vague. So at Ralph Lauren, what that means is like creating an environment that we visually represent with clothing that we've mocked up to change it or styled it a specific way. And we put a bunch of looks together against a beautiful backdrop, wall, whatever. So it feels like you're kind of immersed in a space. And then when we present it, the design teams work with that and design into it so that all the pieces feel like they could live in that world.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, and that's basically it. But luckily, we're involved all the way through the product cycle. So we work closely with the designers all the way through to the store.
So does your role come in like before the designers are even thinking about what to design for that season?
Yes. So
And
we're the very, very first step.
that's cool. That's cool. And where do you draw your kind of directives from? Is there an overall vision that's going to say, okay, next season, is it coming from trend forecasting or is it how's it starting before that?
That's a great question. It depends season to season a little bit. Ralph Lauren is a heritage brand. So, first and foremost, we are diving into brand history and seeing where we've been before, what might be relevant again. We are constantly observing and trying to follow trends, but we're not a trend driven brand. So, we want to stay relevant but aware. So, we kind of use that as a little bit of a driver. And as far as like the actual inspiration, it's often a place or a movie. And I think if you know anything about the brand, I think that's very apparent in the collections throughout the entire history of the company. So yeah, that's kind of where it starts.
Cool. How do you like as a concept designer, how do you where do you pull some of your inspiration from? Like you mentioned like place or a movie, but do you feel like you need to stay kind of up and relevant about certain parts of culture that you're gonna pull that inspiration from? Or do you pull it mostly from the history of the brand? Like how do you kind of like come up with those concepts yourself?
We spend a lot of time on Instagram and social media, unfortunately, and Pinterest. I wish that wasn't the answer, but a lot of that is just where a lot of the information is coming from these days. But I do think a lot, we're in New York City, so it's easy to observe what's going on in culture and society and like the trends. So there's a lot of like street inspiration. That's one of my favorite sources of inspiration is just street style, street fashion. Um, I love all of the like little street brands and their big drops, and I like to follow that. Um, it's which is funny because a lot of them are inspired by Ralph. So it's like this weird,
Yeah, it's just kind of
uh,
like an inspiration
yeah,
cycle from everybody, right?
yeah. But I
Um,
think also I'm personally very inspired by an authentic story. I love workwear, military, and like anything that has like a like true worn story to it,
right.
outdoor apparel, that kind of thing. So I think I pull a lot of inspiration from that kind of content as well.
Something that has like maybe a purpose or a utilitarian purpose
Yeah.
originally, right? Cool. And what is it like for you working within, can you explain a little bit, because you've worked both within children's wear and not, can you explain a little bit like what's the difference in your work and also what's the difference in maybe the cycles and um, I'm not sure how that changes within concept design, but would love to hear a little bit about kind of your feeling of working within children's wear versus other, departments.
Working in children's wear is a little bit less trend driven. In a lot of ways, it doesn't, the trends come a little bit slower. Where women's, you have to be really ahead at all times. Kids, you're kind of, I would say on average, about a year behind. So
Hmm.
you can kind of, you get like a little bit of a buffer to observe what's going on. I think also in kids, it can be very challenging because you're dressing to appeal to a child after a certain age, but you're also always trying to appeal to the parents because they are the consumer ultimately. So balancing that fun but like parent friendly is very hard sometimes. I would say that's a big difference. And then the third major difference I think is testing for children's wear. You have to go through like rigorous testing to make sure that the clothing doesn't have harmful chemicals or like small pieces of hardware,
Yeah,
um,
get it done or something.
ties that are too long, like anything that could be hazardous to a child has to go through crazy testing, and it often impedes what we really want to design.
Yeah. So you have to think much more functionally in terms of how that's going to play out kind of with parents and
Yeah.
also with safety testing, right? Um,
Yeah. And along with that goes budget. I think budget for kids wear is much smaller often because kids grow out of it faster. Parents aren't as willing to splurge on
yeah.
something their kid's going to wear for 6 months.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Um, and so you've had some roles in and out of Ralph Lauren. Can you go a little bit deeper into kind of your career journey and like what are some of the things that you've done outside of Ralph Lauren and how has your career, you know, progressed, meandered, however you would, however you feel that it's kind of gone like, and what are some of the things that you've been doing, just so that I think everybody here can get a understanding the picture of kind of what a career path can look like, and how yours has been.
Mine is a little chaotic. So I know I said was on and off at Ralph Lauren. I originally wanted to do illustration. So I had an internship with an illustrator. I also then had an internship in classic like design with Oshkosh actually. So I was designing kids denim, and that's a very traditional role where you're doing flat sketches, you're doing tech packs, you're doing fittings, like all of that, wash review, like everything. So I've done that stuff. I also went back when I went back to Ralph Lauren, I went into concept, but there was a brief time that I was working on girls' knits. So
Mm.
cut and sew knits, more tech packs, more flat sketches,
Mm.
um, and a little bit of illustration. And then I switched into illustration at Ralph Lauren and I illustrated the whole line for about 5 years. Every season we would have like hundreds of sketches, and that's just
Wow.
what I did all day. Um, and it was part of the concept team, so I like in between sketch time I would be doing concepts. So it was kind of this like back and forth. Then in 2019 I left and worked with a doctor for a year because
Okay.
I thought I didn't want to be in fashion anymore.
Yeah. You're like,
I So this is like a wild career path. I was actually taking pre-med classes at Fordham University, and then the pandemic hit, and I'm so glad I'm not a doctor.
yeah, you're like, and actually, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. I'm good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I got a couple jobs with some small startups where you're doing everything. So traditional design, concept design, illustration, printmaking, or not printmaking, print design.
Right.
I did some freelance print design work for a company called Pact. And I went back into women's wear with a friend for a little bit. I did a little bit of outdoor apparel for my own personal project. And then I went back into women's wear with a small brand, Lingua Franca. Did creative direction for them, which was kind of like concept design. They just don't have that role. And then went back to Ralph Lauren.
Cool.
So,
Really cool. Yeah, it's such an interesting career. And I think it's cool that you're trying a lot of different things. I mean, I do think that a lot of people have well, I would say some people have very linear career paths, right? Um, even though they're trying different things within a company, they might be within one company, for example, or they might have one role, but across different companies, right? It's interesting that you've both through your studies and then through your actual roles that you've had that you've been trying a lot of different stuff, right? How did you find all those different roles? Like where did you was it just through connections that you had built over time with previous roles that people came to you, or were you seeking it out? Like how did you find all those different types of jobs and especially the consulting types of work that you had?
I would say about 50-50. I do think that having a good school or good degree or whatever, like a respected degree in your field, gets you a long way with that first interview. I also think that if your background stays like interesting, it helps
Yeah.
to get another, to get somebody to look at your resume. Um, but I think too, a lot were connections. I definitely think 50% were connections. So there were a lot of LinkedIn applications, a lot of, I don't think a cold call or cold email ever really worked for me, but
Yeah.
true classic applications did work for me a few times. And then Ralph Lauren was first time was like just an application, but to get the actual job, both times I was there was through connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, connections are so important, and it's something that we talk a
So
lot about within the program. Something that can be gotten through our program is part of why the program exists, but it's not doesn't have to be through our program. You can also build connections on your own. Um, and I think most importantly is like it takes a long time for connections to yield results. It's not immediate, you know. You don't get to like meet somebody and then immediately they're going to be offering you a job, right? So it's just about being
right.
in touch with maybe, you know, 4 or 5 people who are going to be champions within your career. It could even be 2 or 3 people. You don't need a lot. You don't need like 20 people, 20 connections who are going to be like pulling you all the way through. You just need to find a couple of people who are influential enough, have relationships, and are going to be supportive of your career. Um, and that those are going to be the people that make your career, you know, overall. So
So
I don't know if you had a similar experience. And also I think, you know, we've done some surveying of companies that we work with, and you know, we found that around 60 to 70% of their hires come from internet worker referrals, and only about 30% are coming from cold applications. And um, you know, the cold applications are also getting a lot more applicants than they are through the referrals, right? So the chances through a cold application are much, much, much lower than if you can find a way in. Um, and um, and you know, that only makes sense because people want to like go with people that they trust or they've been referred rather than like, oh, let me just take a bet on this person who nobody knows, right? So you do want to try to like just see who's in your network, whether that's your professors, whether that's your, you know, whether that's friends of your parents or like, you know, somebody that you met, you know, somewhere at a cafe or something like just build those connections and then continue to keep in touch with them so that you can have those opportunities. Um, Tell me a little bit about like maybe what was one of the out of the different roles that you had, like what were some of the most exciting things that you did? Um, what were the things that really kind of you felt were most true to what you enjoy doing? I hope it's what you're doing now. No, I'm just kidding. But like tell us a little bit about kind of some of the aspects that you really enjoyed out of the roles that you've had.
I think anytime my role involves a lot of creativity, a little bit of presentation design, and a little bit of drawing, I'm very, very happy.
Mm,
Um, I think those are probably my top three things that I would look for if I were to ever change roles. It's part of why I'm happy where I am.
yeah,
Um, I think when I was at Lingua Franca, that I hope my boss never sees this. That was probably the coolest role that I ever had. I think Ralph Lauren is, I'm so honored and like humbled to be there, but Lingua Franca being such a small brand,
yeah,
um, and touching every part of the process, and there was no brand history really at all. So it was very like free flow, like today we're going to try this out and tomorrow, the owner might not like it, so we have to pivot. And it was just like fast and fun and heavily involved. I just thought that was probably the most creative job I ever had.
cool.
Um, and then at Ralph Lauren, I think I'm in the most creative role at the company. So I have literally zero complaints about that.
Yeah,
And I think it's very exciting anytime we get to be any part of like a bigger picture, like when we get to do the fashion shows. It's really special, and seeing Ralph's dream just come to life every single day, even
mm,
just in the office, is just really incredible.
mm.
So I feel like that's a lame answer, but it's very
Oh, it's
exciting
great.
literally
It's
every day.
awesome. I love the fact that you really love your work and like that's not always the case, right? So I love to hear that. Maybe you know, what's some of the pieces of advice that you might have for students that are like looking to get into the fashion industry? I'll just do a couple more questions here and then we'll go into the next steps. But tell me, like, do you have any, I know it's very broad, but like what advice would you have for those who are like looking to step into the industry now? I don't think everybody will have the blessing of getting a role at, you know, somewhere like Ralph Lauren right out of school. Um, and that's okay for everybody that's on the call. Like you don't need to be linear. You don't need to start off at the best place or your dream place, or maybe Ralph Lauren is not your dream place, right? Like, you can start off somewhere and continue to navigate your career towards the directions that you want to go as you continue to build skills. First stop is not your last stop, right? So, but some advice maybe for those who are just getting started off and are looking to get in the industry, whether that's around how to navigate their career or like how to excel kind of in the early stages of their career.
Well, I think connections are very important, and having like a group of people that are creative or like interested in like a similar field or pursuing similar roles. I think it's good to keep them in your circle and keep each other updated. And they may be your most important connections 15 years from now. So I think that's really important. And I think it also keeps you in kind of, when you're in school, you have this like competitive drive that's good. It's a healthy competitive drive that keeps you kind of on your toes and thinking new ways of doing things and thinking how, like, oh, this person did this and I want to do something, but I'm going to make it different. I think if you keep yourself in a circle of like-minded people, you keep those kinds of thoughts going. And I think that's very important because you want to think for yourself, but you want to know what's going on.
Mm.
And make connections along the way. Sorry, my light just went out.
No,
Um,
okay.
and I think also it's, people say the portfolio, you can't stress it enough. It's very important. Some interviewers may never look at it. It's still very, very, very important. It helps you discover what you like to do. It helps you to see patterns in your own work so that you can start to align future goal brands with like what your aesthetic is, because it's very hard to fit your aesthetic into something that's not close at all. Like, you're still a designer, anyone can do it, but it's not as fun and it's more challenging, to be frank. So I think the portfolio is an excellent exercise, and I just think, like, continue to do projects. I am guilty of not, and I would love to do them all the time. I think it's just helpful even 15 years in. It can teach you a lot about yourself. Um, and then I also think a big piece of advice is just to not end up in your own little bubble. I think you want to get out and observe, travel, see things. I mean, even if traveling for you is one town away on a $5 train, I think it's worth it. It's just important to see what's going on in the world. You can't, like, that's what fuels your inspiration. I don't want to say you can't come up with something from nothing. People do it all the time, but it's very hard to keep that up
Yeah.
without external things. And I think it also helps you stay relevant, because in the design field, you do need, it's not art. You need to know what's happening. There is a business goal
Hmm.
involved.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. And I think AJ, that answers your question that you put in here. Can you touch on the importance of portfolios, please? Um, Portfolios, I like it. So the three things that you said is connections, strong portfolios, and then continuing to find inspiration, right, through travel and through new sources and new inputs. And we talked about connections. And we have some sessions specific on connections, that we do, um, but I think that it is important to just kind of build good relationships. And what that means is, like, try to put your best foot forward around the people that you're working with. Don't stop an internship halfway through, just finish it, like, make sure that you're, um, you know, kind of just being somebody that's easy to work with and pleasant to be around, even in challenging environments, because that goes a really long way in your career. And then you mentioned also portfolios, and portfolios are so important because when you're applying for jobs, it's a process of elimination for the recruiter. So they might be looking at 100 or 200 or 500, applicants. We don't know how much, right? And but it's always a lot, and they're trying to eliminate the ones that are not going to pass the test because there's too many for them to look at deeply. So they just have to have a way of being like, okay, how do I get half, how do I boil this down to half or 25% of what I've got here for us to take a deeper look? And the first thing they're going to look at is either your resume or your portfolio. And if it's not up to standard, if it's not what they're looking for specifically for that role, they're going to take it out of the stack. So you don't want to be eliminated for something like, my portfolio link didn't work, or it's not laid out properly, or, the images are too big to load on the website or something. Like they won't spend their time on it. So you don't want to be eliminated from a role just for that simple reason, right? So better to just make a good portfolio, and then a good portfolio doesn't need to have a lot of work. It can have, 5 or 6 projects in there, but clean layout, on your own website, easy to access, links working, that's the basics. We do actually have a session coming up for portfolios. I'll just re-put that link on November 12th. So it's for more for design and brand, but I think that a lot of the information that's there is very, very applicable to fashion as well, because we talk a lot about format. Um, Cool. So I'm gonna just switch over briefly. Ellen, I'll give you a 5-minute break. I'm gonna switch over briefly to talking about Outbound Initiative, and some of you, I actually see 1 or 2 of you that's in the program right now, so that's great. I will, you know, just talk about us for a moment, and then you can put your questions in the chat. So while I'm talking about ABI, questions that you have for Ellen or questions that you have for me, please put them in the chat so we have lots of questions to get to when I come back from this little portion of the presentation. Let me just share my screen again. Okay, so our Pound Initiative, we're a global career accelerator for creatives, and what that means for us is helping, students and recent graduates within the creative industries to get your career started. Um, we focus on the internship component, but we're much more than the internship. We are professional development course, a network, mentorship, coaching, support all the way throughout, and an internship placement, which I'll get into the full details of. So there's a bunch of different destinations that you can go within our program for internships. Within the US, we have 5 locations, so New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, and Austin. And then if you want to go in Europe, we have London or Berlin. In Australia, we have Melbourne and Sydney. And then if you aren't able to travel to any of these cities, or you're in school or financially not able to travel to any of these cities at the time, we do have virtual internships as well, which is a great option too. In terms of our internship types, we focus in 5 main categories. So, fashion, of course, I'll just kind of start from the bottom right here. Fashion, of course, is what everybody here is probably interested in. We don't do fashion design specifically, but we do focus more on the fashion business. So, marketing, wholesale, trend forecasting, PR, editorial styling, or talent management. We also have fine arts, marketing and advertising. So maybe you're interested in getting into like, social media marketing or into editorial. We have things in design, graphic design, branding, layout design, and then entertainment media. So if you're interested in film production or post-production or music business, those are areas that you could get into. Um, Within our program, you'll select with our team, like you'll select a few internship types that are relevant to you and that are interesting to you. And then we'll also be working with you to figure out which destinations are feasible. Sometimes there are restrictions based on visas or based on what we have available at certain places. So we'll figure out the right destinations, and then in the program, we'll be, seeking an internship for you within those types and destinations. There's 4 main program inclusions if you decide to join. Um, so our ABI Academy, guaranteed internship placement, creative network, and dedicated support. And we are a paid program. We're like a course that's outside of your university. So, we want to make sure that we're bringing as much value to you as possible if you choose to move forward with the program. Our ABI Academy, there's 2 different components to it, and this happens before the internship placement. So this is all about preparing your profile for the interviews, and then preparing you for the internship itself. So within the first component, we'll be working with you on your portfolio, your resume, your interview skills, and also recruitment preparation. And that's happening through coaches in our team, and also our team helping you to make sure that everything's prepared. And this is all practical, all things that we really need, because we're going to be then sharing your profile out to all of our company partners that are relevant to you in that destination and in those internship types. And in the meantime, while we're getting those interviews and looking for an offer for you, you'll be working on module 2, which is preparing for the internship. And again, this is happening through live coaching sessions, similar to like what we're doing here with Ellen. You'll be getting coaching sessions about career and about like LinkedIn and how to get a job afterwards and other things. You'll have about 5 sessions in total, and also some content for you to watch to have you prepared. And all of this is built for full-time students, so it's mostly can be done on your own time. It's all virtual. There's some deadlines, but it's about 3 to 4 hours a week maximum that it should take your time. Our coaches, Justin is working for Warner Brothers, Jen is MTV Paramount, Kevin is creative director with Omnicom Group, Michael works with Ellen at Ralph Lauren. Vanessa is a senior recruiter at Quint, and she focuses on the creative industries, and then Jazz, director of global social media marketing at Shutterstock. There's just a few of our coaches and some of the people that you'll get value from during the program, and potentially, if you build a relationship there, potentially some mentorship as well. We do have a guaranteed internship placement within our program, so we just want to make sure that if you're choosing to utilize the program, that you are that you have something lined up, right? Especially if you're doing it for academic credit, or if you're doing it for the summer, or if you're going internationally, you need to make sure that you will for sure have something. So we do guarantee an internship placement. How we do this, we don't actually have any financial relationship with the companies that we work with. Our goal is to build up your profile to be as strong as possible. And then we do have connections with them. So we do have a network, and that's where that kind of we're kind of like your network within the industries, you could say. We're able to get your resume to the top of the stack. But at the end of the day, they're still going to hire you based on your interview skills, your resume, and your portfolio, and whether you're in alignment with the role. So we don't know at the early stages who you're going to be hired with, but we're going to be guaranteeing a role within the fields and destination that you choose. Internships could range from 3 to 6 months in duration. They're part-time or full-time. They can be for academic credit or experience. One thing is we can't guarantee a paid internship experience because we work with a variety of company partners, and some are paid and some are unpaid, and we don't know in the early stages, who you're going to be hired by. So we just like to be very transparent about that in the beginning. And then about 60% of our participants have been hired post-internship. So lots of different opportunities with over 300 company partners around the world. A few company partners that we work with, Area is a fashion company in New York. Joe Fresh Goods is a fashion company in Chicago. Hatch is an agency for retail apparel and fashion in LA. Raptor is a marketing agency in London. Creation Collective is a fashion company in Melbourne. Kruba is a fashion company in Berlin. Romance Was Born is another one in Sydney. So, we have things outside of fashion as well, but of course, because of the conversation today, and as I mentioned, we have many company partners. It's just kind of a selection of some, you can see the companies that we're working with. If you're going internationally, we handle the visa support for you. So we're doing the visa processing, insurance arrangements. We have optional housing arrangements for you to utilize. You'll also have an in-city orientation from the coordinators that we have on the ground in each of the cities that we operate. And you'll get kind of like a pre-trip information package and guide to the local scenes. And then you have dedicated support from our team throughout. So program coordinators are going to be helping you with, that onboarding, and also the ABI Academy. You'll have travel and placement coordinators are going to help with the visa processing, and also doing all the heavy lifting, getting you placed for one of the partner companies that we work with. And then in-city coordinators that are there to give you the orientation. They're going to do events while you're in the city, and then they're there for emergency contact too. And then last, you have access to our creative community. So, we were talking about network. You don't need this to build a network, but it is helpful to have like a shortcut, right? And that's something that we want to help provide for our participants. This is a members app with our alumni, and we've had over 1,000 alumni go through the program. You can connect with people who are more senior to you, who have been through the program a few years back and are now working within different brands, and just say, hey, you know what, I'm an ABI, you went through ABI, like let's grab a coffee or let's meet online. And you can also connect with others who are like going through the program at the same stage, just so you can start to build that network. Because all of you are going to grow in your career, so it's good to kind of like plant those seeds now so that you have those relationships later down the line. Some of our alumni have moved on to work for great places, so it's a good chance for you to like you know, see some people and see like, who you could potentially connect with, just as some examples. We do have a tuition to our program. So, as I mentioned, we're like a course outside of your university, but we try to provide so much more value than you would get out of a course, and more practical application. So, if you're doing this locally, or if you're doing virtually, it's 2250. If you're going international, it's 3250, and that covers the four things I mentioned before, but it doesn't cover, visas or flights or housing or third-party fees that are outside of the program components mentioned here. And then we do have a grant. It's between $500 up to the full program fee for those who are in financial need. And this is for our local or for our virtual program. So if you are in financial need or if you're on financial aid, for example, you may be eligible, and you can check that out on our grants and scholarships page. And then I will tell you just how to apply briefly. So there's two things that you can do. Number one is you can check out our eligibility form. This is on the homepage of our website. And just fill in some information and submit it if you haven't already. And this will get you to a call with our team where we'll do a consultation and you can ask questions about the program. And then secondly, if you want to apply, you just go up to the application page here. You fill out the application form with your resume, your portfolio, a couple academic references, and a personal essay. And then if you're applying for the grant, hi Danny, if you don't mind not sharing. Yeah, thanks. And then you can fill out the information for the grant and then go to start your application and fill it out there. We do have, there is no fee to apply, and we have an upcoming deadline on November 10th if you're looking to do things for summer of 2026. We need a lot of time to make sure that your profile is prepared and that we have things lined up, especially if you're going internationally. So if you're thinking about doing a summer internship, I'd recommend for you to go ahead and apply. And you've already seen events, which I shared there, but we have upcoming events, including portfolio components. So I'm going to stop sharing screen now, get back to all of your questions. So if you have any questions at all about the program or for Ellen, we'll get through those. Let's see. Let me get to the top here. Kelvin asked, when it comes to working on projects from planning at the beginning and working with all aspects of it until the end of the project span, would that be something you'd recommend to those who'd like to be a creative consultant and designer, or is that just preference of your work style? I guess the question here is like, as a consultant, it sounded like you were doing kind of help all the way through. And is that something that would be required of you as a consultant or a designer, or is it just something that you like to do?
I think it depends on the work. And I think also if you're a creative consultant specifically, you kind of set up the boundaries for what part of the process you want to be involved in. I genuinely love being involved start to finish. It brings me immense satisfaction. If I can't be, I would like to go to a certain step. And I would say, here's where I like to start, which for me would be concept. And here's where I would like to minimum end. And that would be the line design is complete. That
Yeah,
would be how I would do it.
cool. Cool. And I think AJ had a question about portfolios, but we already touched on that. Portfolios are very important and required, especially if you're getting to design roles. I think if you're going towards business types of roles, marketing, advertising, project management, things like that, you don't need a portfolio. But if you're going towards anything like social media management or content creation or, fashion design, it's required, or in the cases it's not required, is very helpful. It will help you stand out from the pack. Kelvin, another question from Kelvin. What key components helped you know companies you wanted to work for? Was the size of number of employees working there, did that matter for you? Or like, Kelvin's wondering if that specifically, but what are some of the components that helped you know which companies you wanted to work for?
For me, I think my core values were very, sorry about my dog. My core values were very important to me. I think everybody has core values. Some people have like more of a desire to keep those in line with their company. I'm one of those. So sustainability was very important to me. Creative environment was very important to me. Collaborative environment was very important to me. And not gonna lie, benefits. I'm an adult in New York
Of
City. Benefits and salary were very important to me. So
Yeah.
you know, every once in a while you're going to have to compromise on something, and that's fine. Number of employees in a company has never been a huge issue. It does affect benefits and salary. It does not necessarily change anything else for my core values. Um, I've worked at companies that had two employees, and I've worked at Ralph Lauren who has like, I don't even remember, like 50,000. Like so
Yeah.
I would say that does not matter.
Cool. You said that number of employees if affects benefits. Do you think that's affecting it positively or negatively? Like the larger
Uh,
company more has more to, and not, sorry,
yeah.
maybe I'm putting you in a weird situation. But I think I'll try to answer that question, which is just that I think probably larger companies have a little bit more range and flexibility in terms of like both roles you can kind of navigate through, and also maybe in terms of longevity of working for them because they have a little bit more stability.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're consulting for a smaller company, they may not have, they may be just starting off. They may be trying to kind of like figure out how their product is going to sell, et cetera, and that may be beneficial. For example, maybe you can have some shares in a company or you can have some future benefits in them, but they may not have the same kind of cash flow to be able to offer the same types of benefits potentially. Don't know your situation, but we won't get into that.
And I say benefits, but I mean, there are benefits, and then there's, health insurance. So,
Right,
you
correct.
know,
Yeah, correct. Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, there's health insurance. How do you forecast future trends? Like, how does trend forecasting work? Maybe I guess is the question here. Broad
uh,
question.
yeah. So I think everybody works differently for that. Some of it is just like some people are just good at picking up on what trend is going to be next. That's part of being in a creative field. Some people, that is one of their skills. For our team, we do have to have evidence of what that is because it is a heritage brand that's not trend driven. So when we present a new idea, we need to have proof that that is a valid idea. A lot of that is Pinterest, as I mentioned before, but we do have trend forecasting tools that we can use at our job. There are a few companies that do this. WGSN is one of the main ones, and you can look to them. I believe they present quarterly, and they will give you color trends and like big picture trends, like, oh, military is going to be huge this year. So that is definitely a tool that's available if that's a part of the field you're interested in.
Those large companies that are doing those trend forecasting, do you think it's a little bit self-fulfilling, or do you think it's that they're really tapping into something? Yeah.
My personal opinion is I think it's self-fulfilling. There are big picture trends that you can kind of see forming. There's also inevitably a pendulum. Everything is a pendulum. So we had our minimalist moment from like 2010 to 2020, and then we were all stuck inside for a pandemic for a year and a half, and maximalism came out. So there are ways to predict it in that way where you're like, okay, we've been like wearing a lot of spandex for 20 years. Now we're going to want to wear something loose and made out of natural fiber. So like that is an element of it, but I do think sometimes those trend forecasting sites, because they're informing so many different companies and designers, it is a little bit self-fulfilling because people are going to be like, oh yeah, that green, yeah, we should run that, and then it happens. So, you know, you give and take.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I like that thought of kind of things being a pendulum. That can maybe help it is to think that things are going to swing back in a different direction, over time. How long would you say that cycle tends to be? And I'm sure that changes based on the thing, but like in Ralph Lauren, when you are cycling through different like past things, are you looking at 20 years out? You said that you look a lot because you're a heritage brand, you look a lot at like kind of what you've done in the past. How far back are you looking typically?
It changes all the time. I would say most often we're looking at least 15 years back.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes we're looking 30 years back. I
Yeah.
mean, luckily we're at a company with 50 years of heritage. So, um, yeah, I think it depends. It's a little bit specific to what we're working on as well. Um, like I think our fall heritage stuff, we can look any year at Ralph Lauren and find inspiration for fall because it's such a classic season.
Right.
Um, yeah. And I think as far as like in the market, things are getting faster and faster because of social media. So it used to
Yeah.
be like 20-year, 30-year cycle, and now it's like two. So
Yeah. Uh, um, okay, and then Archie asks what would you recommend someone to do if they don't have a fashion background or experience? How can they get started in the industry? And Archie, I asked you here as well. You can put in the chat like what is your background? I think that'll be helpful to guide this, but maybe Ellen, you can start there.
I feel like that's a great question because I had that question and then I went to Parsons to solve it for myself. I would say that a lot of what I know today that I actually use today, I learned in the industry itself and not in school. And if I say that I went to school to make the connection. So if you have the capability of making a connection without getting the degree, and you have a creative and flexible skill set with a desire to learn, you can enter the fashion industry without a degree. But I want to be careful saying that because you don't see it all the time. And I do think that the school or the degree gets you those connections. So it's kind of this like catch 22. But there are a few lucky ones that slip through without any. I think if you can do some projects that are fashion related to show that you have like a starting point and some skills to offer and an interesting point of view, I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice as well as doing some projects if you're not able to go back to school. Archie mentioned that you're studying, your background's in dramatic arts. I think what I like to think of is like you want to figure out what are the stepping stones that you can get to where you want to go. So, for example, if you want to apply for a fashion, design job at a big company like Ralph Lauren, um, maybe that's not the right first direction to go. Maybe you want to start somewhere like, for example, can you do costume design for a theater company, since you study dramatic arts? Or can you take a class in costume design and then start working for a theater company? And then, like, cool, I've done costume design. Now I want to try doing some design for a small boutique brand. And then, okay, I've done a small boutique brand. Now can I, go and work for a bigger company? Or maybe it's not on the design side. Maybe, for example, it's getting into other aspects of the business because once you work for a big company, it's a little bit easier to move around once you're inside because your network is there. It's not necessarily mean that you automatically have the skills to do a specific role, but at least you can easily tap in access into the network because you're working with those people. So just think about kind of like what are a few steps that you might take and what would you build those connections because you want to be the strongest candidate or a strong candidate in each thing that you're applying for. So it might take a couple of steps to get there. Yeah.
We actually have a merchandiser. She's a senior merchandiser, I believe, and she was coming from the dramatic arts.
Yeah.
So you can do it. And I think she just found a role that she liked, and it was a small brand that had room for her to grow into whatever role she wanted. And then it led her into merchandising, and then she could get the job at the dream company in that role. So a small company is a good place to start as well.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Great. So I'm happy you know somebody that has that exact experience.
Yeah.
Helpful. How did you go about networking? Was it conferences or coworkers? I think that there's a lot of like nerves and fear around networking when we talk about it, right? So, like, what's your form of networking? How do you do it?
I am naturally very shy. So networking for me was never like on the offensive. I was very much like, let it come to me kind of thing. So networking for me was my classmates at school. Any events that we attended together, I kind of had them as a buffer and we would meet people at those events. They were usually school or internship based things. And outside of that, I think it's just been coworkers. I've worked a lot of different jobs and just stay in touch with all of your coworkers and make sure that you leave them on a good foot. You don't want to like have any reason for them to not like you and not recommend you for somebody. I don't want to make you nervous. You should always like stand up for yourself, but like, without hurting people, you want to like keep those people in your life. So it's just I can't tell you how valuable that is. It's very, very important. And one of my best friends in the whole world I met because of a job. So I just
Right.
think like it's always going to help you to stay in touch with everyone that you work with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point because sometimes your coworkers also are going to move up, right? Like people are not stagnant within roles, right? So you'll see the connections that you have become really strong over the course of 5 or 10 years because all of a sudden all those people are working within, more senior roles. I think the other thing is like networking is often thought of about the introductory period, like when you first meet somebody, like when people are thinking about networking, they're thinking about like, name tag, like introducing themselves to people. And that's just like a very tiny piece of networking, is actually meeting the person. The biggest piece of the networking is how you cultivate that person and how you build a relationship with them. And so, if you think of it like gardening or farming or something, right, you're planting a bunch of seeds, it's going to take a while for it to bear fruit. Sorry for the cheesy analogy, but you're not gonna like if you plant a bunch of seeds and you don't water them, like nothing is gonna bear, right? So you're not going to get anything out of it. But if you have just like a little patch of something and you're really tending to it, you're going to get a lot out of it, a lot more out of it, right? So I think if you just have a few people that you're cultivating, whether it be a professor or a friend or somebody that you've met, you don't have to go out and go meet 30 people all of a sudden at a conference. You just need to like, keep in touch with them, ask them questions about their life, be interested in them, give them some occasional updates when their advice was helpful and useful to you. And eventually they may, come to you and say, hey, I know you're interested in such and such. I heard this thing pop up. Like, are you, can I recommend you, for example? Yeah.
I think the watering is particularly important there as well, especially if you're networking with peers and not necessarily mentors. Remember that you're all, growing together, and you don't want to be the one taking all the water. You want to water back as well. So I think that helps and takes a long way in the future if you're giving back to them too.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I think that's a good point and something that I should add into my networking slides is like on those ones that I hadn't thought about. So that's a great point. Um, can any grade year do this internship? For our program, you should be in your second year of university when you apply to us, so that you should be finished with your second year of university when you start our program. So you've had enough kind of specific experience under your belt that you can succeed in that internship. Um, okay, Emerson asks, should a student focus on building a strong relationship and gaining experience with one brand through a single internship or pursue multiple internships to learn from a variety of businesses?
Think it is dependent on what your career goal is. If you have one brand you want to work for and that's it, I mean, hopefully you have a backup. Then I would not say go to a bunch of different brands. I would say do everything you possibly can at that one brand until you get the job. Um, I don't know for sure that that works, but that's what I would think. And I've seen it work in the past for other people. Um, but I do think if you aren't sure, taking a bunch of internships at different places, even if they're in different roles, is not a bad idea. It gives you a better idea of what you want, the kind of work environment you want, and the kind of skills that you might have and didn't know you had. So I think it's always worth it to kind of like vary your experience in the internship phase.
Cool. And then I've probably got time for like one more question here, one or two more questions. What does the concept design process look like when prepping for a new season? Skylar asked.
It looks like a lot of research. So about, I would say at least a month of concept development is thinking of things that might be inspiring that are brand relevant, and then trying to find imagery, brand imagery, um, garments in the market, vintage garments, Ralph Lauren garments for us, um, that kind of fit into that. And then it's about 2 weeks of putting together a presentation physically, and then about 2 weeks of putting together a digital presentation that'll go really deep into trend and more like market research and um, kind of like where we see the things that we've chosen and highlighted, how we see that expanding in the line, or details that we think are important that we might have had on the rig, or the rig is what we call the physical part of it. Sorry, I didn't say that earlier. Um, Something that we might, like, let's say if it's nautical and we have a few anchors shown in our physical concept rig, maybe we'll show a whole page of anchors and how we can creatively incorporate them into the pieces in the season. So it goes very, very broad to very, very specific in about 6 weeks, I guess, would be the ideal cycle of a concept development. It includes color, it includes print and pattern, it includes silhouette, new silhouette ideas, plus the big picture, as that's the main thing.
Great. Great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm going to share for everybody here. I'm just going to share a few things in the chat. I'll share, our application page, outboundinitiative.com. You can ask us some questions. I've shared my LinkedIn, Ellen's LinkedIn. Just hit connect. I think if you have further questions for me, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can ask us questions at advisor@outboundinitiative.com if you're interested specifically, in questions around our program. I think, Archie, for your question, I think you can connect with LinkedIn. We can connect potentially with Ellen on LinkedIn and follow up there more specifically rather than here. But I want to thank Ellen. Thanks for your time for joining us for this really great. And it's really cool to see your role. I think concept design is something that's probably not as common, within Ralph Lauren as other forms of design, especially within children's wear. So it's great to kind of get that insight of what a specific role like yours would look like. And it's also really cool to see your journey. I think you've had like an interesting journey, and you've, tried a lot of different things. So I think that kind of demystifies that process of like, oh, I gotta, do step one and then two and then three, to get where I want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for having me.
absolutely. And thanks for joining, and thank you everybody for joining here. Thanks for your questions too. Really happy to have this session, and hope you'll have a great evening or day, depending on where you're at.
Great.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.